think our stream is live.
Okay, now we're live. So very excited here for our second LinkedIn live call, this time with Michael from Merantix Momentum, talking about AI in the public sector. I think it's a very interesting, very exciting topic. Michael, before I let you introduce yourself a little bit more, I shortly want to introduce myself. I'm Tristan. I'm the founder and CEO of the AI Strategy Institute. I'm a lecturer at the Technical University of Munich for the application on management of artificial intelligence. And I'm also a faculty member for AI or GenAI at the Boston Consulting Group. Actually, the topic of today, AI in the public sector, is also a topic that is quite dear to me because I have done, and maybe we can talk a little bit also later about it, a couple of projects in the public sector, be it with the military or with the city of Munich or the GovTech campus. So very happy, kind of like also, to share some know-how. But now I want to kind of like talk with our guest, Michael from Merantix Momentum. So Michael, thank you so much for your time and for being here. And I want to give you a little bit of time to kind of like introduce yourself, kind of like your way in your career into artificial intelligence, and then we can talk a little bit more about the topic of the day, the public sector and AI in public sector.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me in general, and thanks for the introduction. So, as Tristan said, Michael Bornhold is my name. I'm originally from the north of Germany, near Hamburg, and my first love was physics, I guess, and somehow that turned into computer science eventually, and computer science turned into machine learning and AI. So I think I've been building ML stuff far before BC, like before ChatGPT. I think that somehow one has to say that now. I'm from before it became cool. No, just joking. So yeah, I think as a student I did a lot. Back in the days I built some chatbots with Rasa. I don't know if people maybe still know that. Some nice intent-based chatbots that never really worked, but anyway, and became a technical project manager. And then after my studies, I studied in Hamburg and in Munich and a bit in Boston as well. And then, I ended up in Berlin and started at Merantix Momentum and have been at Momentum for 2.5 years now. And kind of as a technical project manager, that means I often do, like, with our engineers, I'll build solutions for our clients, or I'll be as a technical consultant or an AI consultant, even though we don't like to call it ourselves like that. I don't know. And so what I basically do is I'll help clients in the public sector, figure out what they should be building, what use cases to focus on, how to overcome kind of regulation, everything from data security to AI Act, and then also be a product owner or product manager for certain solutions and figure out how to tell the great or the sometimes not so great IT provider kind of to what to do. I hope that was a hopeful little introduction.
Definitely, and quite funny that you mentioned it, because I also have a slide in my lecture where I make this joke, BC, so before ChatGPT and after ChatGPT, and kind of like how the world of AI or the AI landscape has changed ever since. Super interesting, because you said you're focusing on the public sector. What would be interesting for me or for our audience to know, kind of like what can you share some projects so we have a better kind of like understanding with whom you have been working with, if you can share this, and what kind of projects you have been doing with them?
Sure. Yeah, I think sharing projects about the public sector can be a bit iffy. I think everyone who's worked there knows that. I don't know. It's interesting. The public sector has this thing where they like need a lot of support, and it also makes sense for them to have a lot of expert support, because they don't and can't want to employ like the super experts in every topic. And at the same time, sometimes they're very like, we pretend like we did it ourselves. So Anyway, with that being said, I think maybe I'll tell you about 3 projects that are kind of that make sense and show like the broadness of what one can do as like, I guess, a consultant for public sector. So we'll start with the first one, which is the biggest one, which is I can also talk a little bit more openly about, which is with the city of Hamburg. And that's kind of a role where I'm often a product owner for different kind of projects that we can go into, but it's very broad. It's like figuring out what we want to build, what's in priority, then figuring out, okay, if we want to build like this, I don't know, massive chatbot, or we want to rebuild ChatGPT, or we want to build this like, I don't know, assistance progress to figure out like how to deal with internal data and internal structures. Then I'll do stuff like requirements engineering and figuring out who we want to build it with, and then be the product manager, for example, or the product owner. So that's kind of the first one, which is like really help with the people who build AI in the city of Hamburg. The second project is with one of the ministries where we built like a like an answer supporting machine, in the sense that a lot of citizens write questions to the ministries, to the chancellor or to anyone else basically, and then they have to give answers. Like this is like part of the political talking with citizens, and so they get like thousands of questions per week, and then they have like texts that are like, this is what we're allowed to say about this topic, right? Somebody asks something about COVID, or something asks somebody about, I don't know, like very complicated topics like the situation in Gaza, let's call it this way, and then they give like a political answer for this. So it's like very touchy projects, and we help to build a system that like takes a question from a citizen and then looks what kind of documents have been like approved for this kind of topic, and then it suggests an answer. And then obviously like people will still adopt it and go like, no, this doesn't make sense, we need to write it a different way, and that kind of stuff. So that's the second project. And I think the third one is also nice because it's less flashy, and I think it represents all of these projects that have been going on. There's like been a lot of ML in public sector, but we don't see it because it's like part of these very nitty-gritty internal processes. And we built a kind of analysis tool for geodata, for like satellite views, and the goal was to identify where there are Schallschutzwände next to train tracks. So like Schallschutzwände are like the walls that keep the noise and the visuals of the train out, so that, I don't know, if you have a house 100 meters away from an ICE train track, then you don't get all the noise, and there are lots of regulations about like how loud it's allowed to be, and these kinds of things. But they don't actually know, like the people who work in the Eisenbahnbundesamt, the like train authority, they don't know where these walls are, because I don't know, it's not coordinated somehow. And so we were using like visual data from above to figure out where these walls actually are, so they can do planning and stuff like that. So I don't know, I think it's a nice example for like this weird thing that you could never think of. You don't even know that these authorities exist, but they still like obviously all need tech, IT, and machine learning solutions to like get their work done, where they work with a lot of data and a lot of like large quantities of planning tools. So those are the three.
Very cool. Actually, the last project reminds me a little bit. So this an example I use quite often to teach in my lectures is also a project done by the French authorities, where they also use satellite data to detect swimming pools in backyards, and then check them against the land registry and see which swimming pools have been declared during COVID, and which not, and then that helps them to collect taxes. What is very interesting, so if we kind of like look a little bit at the kind of like the projects that you have been doing. So first of all, I would like to know kind of a little bit, what do you think is different when we're talking about the public sector and doing AI projects in the public sector, maybe to kind of like what we would see in the private sector? Would you say there is a distinction?
I mean, I'm sure there is. I think maybe sometimes also sometimes we perceive it as too big of a difference, because at the end of the day, you know, it's kind of internal processes can be very similar and all this stuff, right? But let's say the biggest differences that I could come up with is the procurement process.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, like, this is not maybe the big sexy topic, and maybe also not interesting at all, but for the audience. But at the end of the day, the way that, you know, a little like you know, like a small or medium enterprise can, like, they just like find people online maybe and text them and like, or get a warm intro from a friend, and then they like find a good provider, right? And obviously this is like very different if you're a ministry. You start these giant processes, you go through like the PwCs and Capgeminis and Bechtles of the world, and then like have like these complicated subcontracts until you finally get to a company where, assumably or hopefully, the talent is there to solve your problem. So it can be very slow, and it's also hard for small companies to get in there, because like all these contracts are held by the large companies. So that, yeah, but that's the procurement side. And maybe one of the biggest differences is also the ability, or like the tech know-how, which is just sometimes, I think, a lot lower in public sector than it should be. And I think especially for like the private sector, like there is just more tech knowledge there, because they have their own IT competencies or something like that, or it's easier for them to hire tech talent.
Yeah,
And then
that's an
maybe on the,
interesting point.
yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Continue, and then we can go a little bit more deeper into this point, because I want to talk also a little bit about how prepared is actually the public sector. I mean, at least in Germany, when it comes to doing AI. But I didn't
Yeah.
want to interrupt you. Sorry.
All good. I think I just wanted to say something positive as well, because those were like two kind of negative points, is that the data, not availability. I think there's always this problem of like, you know, siloed data, and it's just in Excel tables, or like people don't. But in general, because we're talking about really the people who, I don't know, analyze like all the streets and cars and bicycles in the whole city of Berlin, then they have these massive amounts of data, right? And it's just something that the private sector often doesn't have, because it's a lot more, you know, it's a lot more like decentralized, or everyone, you know, everyone has a part of the cake. And in the public sector, the cake is kind of here, and it's with this team, and it's right there, and that's always going to be there for the next 20 years, right? So I think that's a big upside and opportunity for the people.
And then there's also an interesting point, because I also think like a lot of very interesting kind of like projects, because of the data that you collect as a in the public sector, are actually in the public sector, because you can just like work on problems that you get to work nowhere else. But what I want to understand, kind of like going to the second point that you said, like where is the public sector, at least in Germany, at the moment standing? Like how prepared are they? How, like, are they at the forefront of AI? Are they very hesitant? Are they just like trying things out? And do they have kind of like the foundations ready to actually do AI? Or if you come in, you kind of like have to start from scratch, and you kind of like have to start educating them and getting all the data sources together and so on.
It's a big question, I think. Let's see. So I think one maybe thing that people don't know necessarily is that the IT for the public sector, and hence all the IT like of services that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, I don't know, filling out some form to get your, I don't know, to get your car license plate, right? This IT is kind of managed by publicly owned IT providers, but they're kind of separate from the civil servants. So you kind of have like, let's take Berlin, for example, like the city of Berlin. You have the civil servants of the city of Berlin, and you have the IT provider of the city of Berlin, which is like an IT company that is a service provider to the civil servants, but also the IT company is like kind of like public sector. Like, they're owned by public money, they're paid by public money, they have structures that are typical for this. And that means that they're like very per definition, they're kind of conservative, right? Because they're the people who take care of like the email server of like the police or something like that, which obviously is something that shouldn't be breaking down all the time. And then sometimes the IT providers are also like semi-private, but often they're like publicly owned. So, and what that creates is that in the civil servants, there's often very few IT knowledge. And that's, I think, one of the bigger barriers that we're seeing is that kind of you don't have teams that are like digital natives. You don't necessarily have teams that are like kind of have a classical upbringing in like technical skills. But maybe you have like backgrounds in communication or in law or in politics or something like that. And overall, I think that's a big blocker, because it's kind of like to come up with the idea of how to solve something with modern tech, or to adopt it in the first place. Like if you give them an ChatGPT like tool, then they don't have like a lot of people who are going to be first movers then, for example. So I think the whole technical literacy is like a big issue. But at the same time, it's kind of, AI is such a hype topic, and it's like so much out there, and all the politicians are talking about it, that at least there's no like closing their eyes, they're not like, they don't run around and go like, AI doesn't exist and it's not going to do anything. I think generally everyone has understood that this is like a big opportunity, and a big opportunity for the public sector, because the public sector works so much with documents and with written statements, and like basically LLMs are made for public sector in some sense. But yeah, that was just a part of the answer, but I don't want to monologue too much. So
just to dig, kind of like LLMs are made for the public sector. I think this is kind of like a interesting statement. What, like, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on this? Because I know you have done some LLM projects, and maybe what do you think, kind of like after BC, kind of like, I think the topic also have been very kind of like dominant for the public sector when kind of like these large language model capabilities came out with ChatGPT. What do you think has been the impact, and why do you think is this perfectly made for the public sector?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not perfectly made, but in the sense that there is this massive potential in the public sector for intelligent information processing, right? I think if you think about it in like the broadest terms, that you think a thing that the civil service does for us is it has information, or it gives us information, or we give it information, and then it gives us services back, right? Like money or some kind of other service. And it's all about information processing in the end. And that means that if you have systems that are good at information processing, be that ChatGPT, be that applying law, be that finding certain information in a large data set, then that's something that inherently like LLMs are good at. And the big asterisk is they're not perfect at it yet. And often in public sector, you need perfect. And also they hallucinate. And that's a big problem, because if we're talking about law applications or I don't know, education or any kind of decision making, we don't want 90%, we want 100% precision, right? Because otherwise you're basically, I don't know, messing up people's lives by not giving them the service that they need. So like, it's not like, I'm obviously not saying LLMs will solve everything there, and they're like, as long as we have limitations, it's kind of like people are scared of applying these things to the actual processes. But in general, the potential is massive, I think, in a sector like the public sector.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is kind of like where I want to go in a little bit more, because when we think about kind of like that, often how I see it, kind of like two areas for each organization, and it doesn't matter if you're a public sector or if you're not a public sector organization, where you can apply AI. And this is either kind of like in your offering, so if you have products or services that you can apply it there. So in the public sector, that would mean like probably most of the time the citizens, so kind of like providing services directly to the citizens, versus we go on the other side and thinking about processes that we have internally. So how can I use AI to make make me as an organization more efficient. And when we look a little bit kind of like at stories we hear all the time from kind of like the public sector, that it takes, for instance, I don't know, for me it's now taking 4 months to get my VAT number, that you hear kind of like the workers there are so overworked that it takes 3, 4, 5 months for you to get any response. I see kind of like, obviously in the processes is a lot to take. Where do you see kind of like there's a big angle? Should we more focus kind of like on the internal processes, or do you see, okay, hey, we should also think about how can we maybe provide innovative service to our citizens? Because at the end of the day, the public sector is a servant to the citizens, and should support the citizens in their everyday life, in doing business and so on, right?
Totally. I think the reality is that internal comes first and external comes second. And the reason for that is hopefully not that people think that like giving a service to citizens is a second priority. I think it should be obviously the first priority. But the reality is also that let's say it's hard to apply a very new technology and a new paradigm to like your customers. And it's easier to do it internally first, where you have less risk, or where you can teach people, you can like enable people to use the tool correctly, all these things. So I think it's very clear that we're seeing a lot of internal stuff. We're seeing a lot of like knowledge management. We're seeing a lot of like internal chatbots, like, I don't know, how do you use this product? And then you build a small chatbot so that people don't ask the IT provider the whole time, or you build like ChatGPT like solutions for internal use. And the only things that I'm seeing that are like customer facing are chatbots. So there are a few chatbots out there that are like pure LLM run. I can give you some example. There's a cool little startup called Neuralflow. Shout out to them. They got like founded out of University of Bremen, I think, and now they're like building chatbots for Kommunen, so for like cities and small like stuff like that. And yeah, it's cool to see like that those small cities like adopt the new technology, and in the end the products are better than any kind of old intent-based thing, right? Because there's just this natural flow to it. And then you can, I think the one in Bremen is called Heinmück or something like that, so it has a funny Nordish name. And then you can just chat with it. So I think that's something that will come a lot, like improved chatbots. I think in Hamburg also they're thinking about kind of setting something up where you can chat with the pages of Hamburg Day. You can figure out all the information that is on the websites as well.
Yeah, I think this is a functionality that a lot of kind of like municipalities and cities have been working with. So I've been working with the city of Munich, and they also have kind of like these customer facing things, and they have something like Muck ChatGPT, or it allows you easier to kind of like find information, to have like smart search on the websites. So I see there are a couple of very interesting use cases being probed. But another challenge I noticed kind of like working with the public sector is again what we see everywhere. I mean, it's easy now to do a proof of concept, but really to bring it into production, so that the product runs in production takes quite a bit and much more effort. And one feeling I was curious to see kind of like what was your experience. What I had is it's probably a little bit more difficult to bring in this new technology in the public sector, because there's so much stigma and so much, like you tell them, okay, hey, we have a chatbot, and the first thing that they see is kind of like, okay, well, where's the data coming? How about data security? How about they see kind of like the challenges at the forefront. And maybe one example I can share is kind of like now with the AI Act that is coming. So we had a discussion about, okay, well, what use cases should we develop, and they said, I don't want to mention kind of which of my clients said that. It's kind of like, okay, hey, we don't want to build any kind of like of these high risk use cases. So according to the AI Act, you have kind of like this risk classification of use cases, and use cases that tend to be very critical for our infrastructure have a high risk, and that means that you have to kind of like do more in order to comply. So you have kind of like very similar to medical device regulation, where you have to show if you, for instance, put in kind of like a pacemaker, that this obviously, if there's something happen, there's kind of like critical to your life. So you just have to show, okay, we have enforced much more. And the problem is that most of many of those use cases would probably fall in the public sector in a high level. And that's why I'm saying, okay, well, seeing again the challenges, and they say, okay, well, we'd rather not do this, or we wait a little bit, which I think can be a big challenge and problem, because the public sector is probably this sector that would profit the most, and then indirectly us would profit the most from the use of artificial intelligence. How do you see this? And also, I mean, someone has written a lot about kind of like prioritizing kind of like the protection of sensitive information, data security, and you're working a lot with those data. So what is your opinion on this?
So I think specifically, maybe one comment on the AI Act. I think you're right in your analysis that not all, but a large part of the public sector projects then can go into high risk. I think we did like an internal analysis with like all the projects that are going on with our clients, and I think we came out about at like 50% or something like that. So, and that's like 50% of them being high risk. I would always tell clients that that's like not a showstopper, and that you can still do it that way. I think in the end of the day, the Act will hopefully just basically force us to do good AI. It's a lot of common sense things in there, but it's still to be seen like how people actually implement it and use it. And generally, I think you're right in that the way it sometimes, or like often, people actually are scared of the regulation, and because they know like how many barriers or how much work it is to get kind of through this thing. So the same as with GDPR. So people are used to GDPR, but and it's not like scary like and new like the AI Act, but at the same time, people like limit themselves in their ideas because they know it's hard to get certain processes through GDPR, and you have to do a lot of work, and you have to work with lawyers a lot, and you have to write a lot of documentation, and sometimes there's risk involved, if you use a cloud versus using a local infrastructure. There is some kind of inherent risk there, and people are scared of that, and that unfortunately often then leads to the fact that projects don't go into production, or they're not started in the first place because people are like, no, we can't do this, it's not allowed. And actually there would be a way. I think GDPR is more like a negotiation of risk versus reward, and the rules that exist. But yeah, if you kind of, it's sometimes taken as a blanket argument to no, we can't do this, and no, we don't want change. But yeah, obviously people like us do want change and do want things to improve and do want to see like how we can push the boundaries. But yeah, it's really not trivial. I think you also having the startup mentality, or this maybe young people and mentality of let's just do it and let's just ship it, the way Silicon Valley works, it's really not applicable. Again, I think this example of the email server of the police or something like that, right? You can't just push updates. You can't just say, we're going to build an AI pilot that writes the emails for you, and we're just going to push it and it's going to run and it's all going to be great. And if things then go wrong, if errors run, if people find new attack vectors, then you've got a big problem. So yeah, there's this, I don't know how to call it, like there's this complicated relationship between progress and new technology, and at the same time all of this regulation, and also like a culture of people sometimes not wanting new, but they want to go slow, and they want to be like handheld, and they want to be told, yes, this is good, and we've checked all of it, and we've thought about every option and every risk that's there. So I think that's also very interesting in when you roll out AI products, that you have to put a lot of energy into enabling people into explaining to them what it is and explaining what it not is, what the limitations are, and kind of how you've made sure that all of the edge cases can be dealt with. And then also you really have to explain basics. Like you have to go like, hey, this is what AI is, this is what LLMs are, this is the history of them. Other people are using them as well. It's not scary voodoo magic. So yeah, like the whole education thing. And I guess that's also what, I don't know, I assume what the AI Strategy Institute goes into a lot as well, is like enablement and getting people to have the basic skills to even understand these products.
Yeah. It's I mean, what we do is also a lot of education, and I'm actually quite funny. Something that I want to share is actually a couple of years ago, I was going around speaking with kind of like different stakeholders from the public sector, from the AI scene, but also with politicians, because what I wanted to do is, so my hypothesis was exactly this, kind of like that the public sector has probably the most interesting use cases for artificial intelligence, and they are the people that profit the most for AI, because at the end of the day, it's we are profiting, and we as citizens are profiting. So, and for me also as an engineer, I think it makes a huge difference if what I'm developing is kind of like predictive maintenance for manufacturing company XYZ, or actually a chatbot that helps to classify requests. So I know which kind of like housing requests are urgent, because people would kind of like in the next week, if I don't answer to this, would sit on the street, and which not. I mean, they just have kind of like a completely different impact on what you can do. So I wanted to build up this kind of like talent program, which is inspired by the UK talent program, where you kind of like have very, very good people going in straight from university, working 2 years in the public sector to get better to know the public sector, and the public sector gets talents it would otherwise not become. And this is something that we wanted to launch, because this is also what we saw. It's kind of like there's a lot of missing know-how in the public sector. Actually, a couple of people told me something which I found very interesting. Is that kind of like was a little bit of a strategy of consultancy. So before, the public sector had kind of like domain experts and really, really good people. And then a lot of consultants came in and said, okay, well, you should become more lean, and these domain experts are too expensive, and you should outsource them to consultants. And now we have a public sector with very few kind of like real experts, and a lot of kind of like administrators and so on. And this is kind of like where we go. And now this is why we spend billions on consulting and working with external people. Another thing I wanted to talk with you is kind of like my experience was that in the public sector, politics plays quite a bit of a role, and you can feel it, because I mean, politics you also have in an organization, but here you have different parties that are often interested, and then also affected kind of like the way how I could work, and kind of like how you can communicate and what you can say. You should kind of like, I mean, I was writing kind of like the strategic positioning for AI, and with a lot, okay, hey, you have to put in sustainability because it's governed by kind of like a Green Party and so on, and we have to make sure that's in there. And I also noticed in a way how people work is they like to talk a lot in political. So they like to, like, at the beginning, the meetings were so difficult because we had long meetings on discussions if you could name something like this, and if it was really like this, that were not output driven. And that was an experience I made with the public sector, what was very strange for me. So what was your experience with kind of like politics in the public sector and kind of like these kind of discussions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what I wanted to say something before. I just want to put one comment on the thing that you said before. I think I want to make an official call out also, in the sense that we need more people, technical people, for working for the public sector. So I think, if that's something that people would ever consider, I think that's something they should really look into. And the good thing is that there are parts of the public sector that are actually more speedboaty and more fast and more open. I think, yeah. So just to put that out there, I think also I've been thinking about it also for a while. I'm not ready yet fully, I think, to go into the public sector, but I think in general we need more technical people there. And the good thing is they have trainee programs, for example, for where more people, technical people, are put into trainee programs, and then they jump around like different positions in a ministry, for example, and they end up where they kind of want to go then in the end. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, hoping that we will solve that problem eventually somehow. Yeah, politicalness in. So I think my experience hasn't been so bad, because when you're building a product, then that means that you're per definition already working with the Arbeitsebene, with the people who are like in the actual doing the actual work. You know, their job is not talking, or their job is not managing, but their job is like like working on some processing term, right, or on some kind of process that gives people access to a service. And on that level, they're more doers. They're not so much talkers, and they also don't care so much about the policy makers. Like, sure, it does matter if there's a green party, then there will be more money for sustainability projects or something like that, right? But the farther you are removed from the political level, the more you really don't care who's up there, and it really doesn't affect your life, and you just make decisions that you've always been making. So I think that was an interesting learning for me. Like, the people that I work with in Hamburg, for example, they're there to digitalize the city, and that's what they do, you know. And there's really not it doesn't really matter if there's like a red or a black mayor or something like that. It's just like, yeah, okay, sure. You know, the only thing that does matter, for example, maybe to get more concrete, is on the whole cloud versus internal, and like sovereignty versus like digital sovereignty versus not so sovereign, or being more working together more with Microsoft or Google, or, you know, general like private sector. I think that's a very political debate. So maybe, Tristan, we can go later also into the differences, like, you know, Baden-Württemberg, Hamburg, both building like LM9 and F13 and LF Alpha, that's an interesting political thing. And another thing that can happen that's also can be political is when kind of like you have these decisions on like, oh, we want to work with a company from Germany, or we want to work with a company from Berlin because we're a Berlin ministry, so we're going to take a startup from Berlin, which I think in the private sector would be a bit weird. Like, why do you care where this company is sitting? You know, if they're Bavarian or from Hamburg, it doesn't matter. But it does sometimes then in the public sector, like, is this a company from our side, or are these like local people? You want to kind of support the local industry. So those are things that do happen, like especially these questions on infrastructure and how dependent are you on a private sector. That's a very political thing, where sometimes just the answer is, like, Schleswig-Holstein, for example, is very much like open source. They want everything to be open source. And that means they won't use, for example, any kind of language models that are not open source, or they won't use any kind of products that are not open source. Like, they wouldn't use, I don't know, IBM Watson or Azure Assistant. They would go to their IT provider and say, build us our own solution.
Very interesting. I mean, let's go, before we go over to the questions that we have from kind of like the audience. This last point, what you said, kind of like the thing of decentralization that we have in the public sector, and that it feels like each city is building their own solution, kind of like what you said with Hamburg, or where you have F13 in Baden-Württemberg, or in Munich. Actually, they built internally. They built MOOC GPT, which I also think is quite cool. What do you see with this, and also a little bit about kind of maybe the discussion with Aleph Alpha that we had or having at the moment? Where do you see them, and why should organizations go for solutions like Aleph Alpha, or why would it make sense?
So the federalism is a giant problem, right? It's like maybe the blocker to get forward faster on a global level, because certain IT services that should be there are just not there, and they're not there centrally because basically there's a lot of like between the federalism and between the like people in Berlin, there's just they haven't figured out how to build like central components. But and I think the way that shows in my world, for example, I think to make it more concrete, is in the city of Hamburg, where you built this like ChatGPT equivalent, which is at Lemoyne. Apparently, there's also some people in the audience who are test users of that. That's funny. And but then Baden-Württemberg also has their own product. As you said, Tristan, Munich has their product. NRW also has a solution. Sachsen-Anhalt also has a solution. So yeah, there's a lot of like, I don't know, whatever the English word for Wildwuchs is. So a lot of like different solutions are being built at different places, and they all look a little bit different, but they all have the same idea. And yeah, it's a real problem because it's a lot of public money that's, one could argue, is being wasted. At the same time, it's good that you have different options. And now maybe this coming year, there will be the phase where people kind of decide we want this product because this is the best, and this is the one that like goes with our work, with our values. And then we don't hopefully have 16 systems in the end, but we only have like 2 or 3, right? That would be my hope. We'll see, like next year will show how well that actually works, or if in the end you really have 17 different solutions for 16 different states. And yeah, about Aleph Alpha, I mean, I think I work somewhat for a competitor, so I think my opinion on Aleph Alpha shouldn't count that much, or should be. I mean, it's biased, obviously, in some sense. I think I hoped in the past, and now I'm a little bit critical, but I still hope that they will become like a powerhouse in building LLM applications for everyone, and obviously also for the public sector. That's like how they position themselves a lot, because that would mean that then German institutions can say, "Ah, we have this German provider, and they're like they share our values," and then they're more open to building solutions with them, and they're not so open to build solutions with Google and Microsoft. Yeah, so that's what I hope what happens, but at the same time, I think it's also shown that, I mean, some things that Aleph like tried to do didn't work out, right? I think like it's very clear that they kind of failed their attempt at becoming an LLM provider, and I hope that they kind of succeed to figure out how to build an infrastructure around that, an ecosystem around that, where they have like enough value to be able to sell that to a lot of public institutions, or to other institutions in Germany that need like a high trust part. So I don't know. I feel like I'm saying a very diplomatic answer, but I'm not sure how else to answer.
I'm also on the one hand side, I always used to be a big fan for a long time of Aleph Alpha. On the other hand side, I mean, I've been quite critical, similar to you, quite recently. Let's see where they're going. I feel kind of like they're actually quite good at kind of like selling and talking, and we still need to figure out how good are they at delivering. And I think one of the reasons is that you see this is that there's a lot of room for people or for companies like you, Merantix Momentum, that seem to be way faster at building these solutions. But at the end of the day, it's not or purely kind of like a scalable product, but kind of like customized solution to the needs of the city. So let's see where that's going, and probably this takes us to kind of like one of the questions. So Arnav asked a little bit, okay, hey, if we identify a use case for a public sector enterprise where AI can enhance decision-making for global development through, for instance, AI-driven insights, how would you approach pitching these projects to organizations? So if you have a cool idea for AI in an organization, in a public sector, how do you approach this? Like as a startup or somewhere, or you, how do you go this? Do you do this, or is it normally there is a procurement process where they ask for a solution and then you come and try to bring a solution?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll first answer how Momentum does it. I'm not sure if that's the best way if you're like a product startup. If I knew the answer to that, I would also start my own product startup and sell to the public sector. So I think the way Merantix does it, and where, I mean, Merantix Momentum is a solution provider. So we don't necessarily have like clear products. We don't sell like some kind of product, but we sell our ML expertise and our ability to like solve very complex machine learning problems. And so most of our kind of revenue in the public sector is need driven, right? So there's an RFP, or someone needs something, or people approach us because we're at conferences or whatever, and then they go like, oh yeah, we also want to do something with AI, or they have more concrete ideas. They kind of want like a chatbot for their internal something, right? And then they come to us, and then we can either consult them or we can actually build it for them. And the only places where we're proactive is actually where we say we have built this for someone, like we've built this chatbot that does this and this, or we have this system in which and how we evaluate use cases, and we can consult you in prioritizing your first use cases. And then we obviously, yes, and we do this with the city of Hamburg, and we do this with these people, and we've done this 5 times, and we understand. And that's, I think, the best way to sell these things, because it's very much a sector where you need to have you need to show that you're not some small startup that's going to fall apart in 5 months, because then they're not interested at all to work with you. But you have to show that you've been around for a while, and you know how things go, and you know kind of how to work with them. Because if you're a public civil servant, you've had a lot of bad experiences with external consultancies and companies that come in, and then they just don't have any idea how kind of the world works, and then they don't provide any value, and you're just paying them big monies. So yeah, I hope that answered the question or helped a bit, Anav. I think if you're kind of a early stage product, then it can be very complicated, and then you need to find this like kind of this institution that takes a leap of faith with you and says, yeah, we're going to try it out, and we're going to do a pilot and test the waters.
Yeah, and maybe because you're also sitting at the Merantix campus, and I know, for instance, also the GovTech campus is sitting there. So maybe this is also a good place to approach and to start, because one of the roles of the GovTech campus is actually connect startups with the public sector, right? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Have you been in contact with them?
So we haven't done a project properly over them, but I know the people there, and yeah, I think there's also a lot of European GovTech funding, actually. So GovTech as a topic is like something that the European Union actually does a lot, and it gives a lot of funding money. It also kind of finances this company called Public, which is a UK-based company. And now in Germany, it's called Possible, actually, but they also kind of do this GovTech, like connecting startups and government. So there are definitely more options, I think, than there were 10 years ago. And also the procurement is also getting easier. So one example, for example, Baden-Württemberg changed their procurement process, that now they can just directly give financing to innovative solutions, I think up to 200K or something like that, without a super big process behind it. So things are improving for the GovTech sector and for like startups that have new kinds of solutions and that are not the big Capgemini and so and so of this world, right?
Yeah. Then let's go to the next question. So maybe let's take the one of Christopher. So you mentioned that companies working in the public sector will focus primarily on using AI internally first before providing AI solutions to their customers, which is probably not true, because it's not 100% what we said, that they kind of like primarily focus on internally first. For instance, the city of Oldenburg has now, I think, a traffic light that kind of like detects if there's rain, and then it will use AI to switch automatically to green if it sees kind of like cyclists in the on the street while raining. So there are solutions that not kind of like in the processes, but kind of like solutions to the customers. But so the question now is, in which areas of these companies do you see the greatest potential to enhance the working process or even decision-making tasks for them? And so it's kind of like, if you're looking in the public sector, where do you see kind of like they can get most out of it looking at the processes?
I think I already mentioned like information gathering and kind of internal document understanding. So I think that's a big one. I don't need to like say it doubly. What I mean by that is like basically search is, we haven't solved search. Like search has been around for a long time, right? But yeah, looking for documents and finding the right kind of information is very complicated. And now through RAG, there's this opportunity to redo kind of the search engines in internal documents. So that's the first thing. I think another thing which is coming now, and I hope is there's a lot of potential there, but it's kind of slow because it's more risk involved, is like actually using mostly LLMs in like document processing. So let's take this simple, let's take the car application process, right? You want to apply for a new car registration, and I think you have to upload maybe 3 documents, like probably that you own the car and the license plate and information about yourself or something like that. And then right now somebody manually processes that and actually takes the data and puts it into some database and then double checks something, and then eventually gives you the service that you want, which is like, I don't know, a date to pick up your license plate or something like that. And in this simple example, there's like so many things that you can automate in terms of information extraction and also in terms of like information alignment. Like, does this thing already exist? Is this the same number? Does this person really own this car? All these questions. It's just like asking different databases. So I think there's a lot of potential for this. I think what it's called is intelligence document processing. Like there are these companies like UiPath, for example, or different ones that like, classical things, OCR, extract information, compare it to something, check if a document is real or not. So there's so much potential there, but it's also kind of slow because this is like the butt and breader of of like civil service, and there's going to be a lot of resistance to automate that away. For one, because then you're very clearly automating away people who are doing that job, and also because those are the processes that can't go wrong, right? So like if you extract wrong data and nobody notices it, then that's not good. So there needs to be a lot of like checks and balances there.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting point that you're touching on, kind of the idea of we don't want to automate people away, which is very interesting because I feel like nowadays there's starting to become an argument versus like the people that say, okay, well, we have to automate people away, and versus like we should not automate people away. And at the moment, everyone is saying, obviously publicly, we should not automate people away, knowing that on the one hand side, it's very difficult to find new experts. And on the other hand side, especially in the public sector, in the next 10 years, I'm not sure, like 30% of the people will be gone and they will not follow. So we have to find ways how we can replace those people that go with automations. And what I also see kind of like the tendency, and I said this once on the panel, is kind of like often in the public sector, we look at the existing process that we have and we think about how we can use AI to make this existing process better. But a lot of the processes are shitty. And if you automate a shitty process, you have an automated shitty process. And thinking about, okay, how can you rethink those processes and really kind of like, how can you make a lot of those things more efficient and allow also kind of like different solutions or different departments to exchange information or exchange kind of like the output of certain predictions. So there's a lot to do. I personally, I'm not sure how you see it. I'm still a bit skeptical, kind of like if we will make it. And I think, and I hope, I mean, we have elections that we really need to invest much more. And maybe to give you an anecdote, I think a month ago I was doing a workshop with a delegation from Saudi Arabia, high-level delegation from the public sector who wanted to learn from the German public sector. And I was there on the first day, and I give a kind of like a more general talk on AI strategy. And then the organizers, they called me and said like, hey, can you come back the last day? Because they're so disappointed because there was actually nothing they could learn from the public sector there, because others are much more open to try, to experiment, to take risks, and so on. And I really believe we need to have a mindset shift. And also kind of like now with hopefully the new government or political elites coming into place, hopefully they understand that they see investments into AI and to the infrastructure that we need in the public sector, not as a cost, but as a long-term investment in the long run, also to save money, but also to make those services more efficient.
All I can say is I think I wish people would agree with your speech. I'm also somehow too much in the system already that I think I also see how it's hard to do that, like like yeah. I think there's a lot of mindset that needs to change, and there's also like literally like laws that need to change, because we still have laws that don't allow for things to run in a digital first world, and in the automation first world. And changing those laws will take a long time, right? Like not months, but years and maybe decades. So I think like all I think I'm still happy that I'm in the system and I'm doing projects that are like that I feel like are for the greater good. And at the same time, it's a big struggle, because it always feels like an uphill battle. So and I think one thing that is hopefully there, that is this new hype technology, AI, like does change people's minds, hopefully, and does like allow them to be more open to technological changes. And then, AI can be like the pusher that pushes the actual data and governance and like IT competence that's needed, and the infrastructure. And also hopefully, if there's a bigger need, because like you said, people are dropping away and we have a lot of people who are going to go into pensions. Where there's a need, then there's a way, right? In some sense, like if I don't know, if people really can't finish their job anymore, then they'll start looking for alternative solutions.
Yeah.
I hope.
Looking at the time is slowly running out, and I look at the chats. If there are a lot of very kind of like interesting and valid comments that you made about kind of like things or challenges that we're seeing in the public sector, be it kind of like with the data quality or different databases or data standards that would make it more challenging. Let's see if there's one more question. I think Anna had one more question, one last question. Maybe we can make it short, and then we just have 3 minutes. He said, how would you address public concerns about LLMs being 90% accurate and prone to hallucination, while explaining their value, speeding up initial analysis, providing reference data sets? So what is the concern? And one thing I can say very quickly is, I say we often make the mistake. We start to think about, okay, hey, what can the solutions achieve today? It will take 2 or 3 years for us kind of often to implement these solutions holistically into the workflows, and just think about where kind of like these LLMs will stand in 2 or 3 years, and try to kind of like do this kind of like exponential growth that we're seeing. I know it's hard kind of like to discount this in our times, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest solution to the two things that one shouldn't do is, first of all, don't miss the opportunity to enable the users. Like, you need to explain the technology and the capabilities to people, and can't just expect them to just use it the same way that maybe we younger tech open people use a tool and we're like, it makes a mistake. That's okay. I can work with it. So that's the first thing, like enablement. And the other thing is, right now, it's not a good idea to build products that like do the judgment for a human. That's like, it's not good for the AI. It's not good for what people are scared of, from a risk profile. And it's also not what LLMs are made for. They're not there to make really great decisions 100% of the time. So it's more about building projects that support that decision, that give a first insight, that summarize something so a human can grok the question faster and get a solution faster. So I don't think we won't see LLM judges anytime soon. We'll see LLM support assistant systems for judges that hopefully make a judge decide something in a more timely manner.
Okay. Amazing. So now that we're coming to our end, Michael, thank you a lot so much for your time. I think it was a very interesting discussion. So for the people there, thank you so much for your time listening to us talking. If you like what we're doing, we're actually doing quite a lot of live events. The next one is Monday afternoon. And if you like what we're doing, just kind of like or follow us. That always helps. And Michael, maybe one last sentence or tip that you want to share before we say goodbye.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, thanks a lot for having me. I also think it was very interesting, and I think at the end of the day, it's a really rewarding place to work in, and I hope we have more intelligent people working for or in the public sector, because otherwise it's not going to be fun to live in Germany in 20 years, and it's already a bit annoying now if you look at the IT that's provided. So yeah, that's my appell for today then.
Okay, thank you. Then thank you all for your time, and goodbye. And hopefully I see you the next time. Bye, Michael.
Bye bye.